So this was our first kind of major land that we owned. This is the only signage that we have on the property. So it was donated, so we have the plaque. So only a few of our other properties have that plaque on there. Otherwise, it's a very unique feature that's not on all of our properties at all. I'll show you kind of where we're at on this map here. Kind of in this visual. So this long line and then over in that direction is the old driveway. So none of this field is our property, none of that field is our property. It's really just an easement, more or less, that gets to here. And then we own the width of a very long time ago was used as a road to access the 20-acre property. In the 60s, and she thought, hey, I'm going to live out here at some point. And from discussion is kind of what we have with Intellico being put in, I think just more development. And there was a bank robber that hid out on the property because it's secluded. She decided, we have a newspaper article, I think in that binder, actually. Not entirely sure. And decided, well, I'm not really going to live out there. I'm just going to use it to escape from Bellingham. And came out here, and then the way that I think she had put it was developers were sizing up the property and were really interested in developing this whole 20 acres because it could be 4 additional home sites in here. So that would have been a driveway. There would have been an additional driveway to reach 4 different points out here. How we walked in here, so right here was that kind of acknowledgement sign. We walked in, turned, and then we are just right here. So we're just at the beginning of the full kind of 20 acres that go that way. Here is where there was a couple of barns. It was more of the homesteaded site, hence the foundations. So the buildings on top of, I think there's 3 foundations out here, were removed. The foundations were left. It would be really nice to at least get like a jackhammer out here and put some cracks into it at least. But right now it's only hosting blackberry is pretty much it. So here, and then there's a couple more in that direction. There are, if you guys noticed on the map here, there are 2 wells in addition. They aren't realistically capped, more or less. It has a cement block, and then we took T-post and bent them over so no kid could try and kind of move them around. So really, I mean, they should get decommissioned further, but that's kind of where they're at there. There's an old root cellar just over the bank there, so that's the coolest spot to hang out for sure. So that's, keep things cold, concrete into the bank, more or less, that sort of a thing. So we passed the sign for American Forest and Alcoa grant. This property was more or less just kind of let be since the 60s. And that's why you kind of see everything left over. All of the alders that you can see, and we'll kind of walk out there a little bit more, they're pretty much all the same exact age, right about 40 years. Surprise, surprise. And then we have a lot of blackberry that has been coming in, kind of coming in the edges. Alders only survive for maybe 50 years. Windstorm comes in, they start crumbling all over the place. We had some branches over the trail. Those were new in the last 3 weeks. Every winter, I'm always wondering, okay, where are the next trees that are going to come down be? And then we have all this blackberry kind of waiting along the edge, just wanting to come in. We only have a few cedars, except for there's one nice Doug fir right over here. There it is. And then only a few cedars that are pretty much like this weird hybrid escaped kind of garden variety to where they almost look like an arborvitae, just super straight all the way through, not your typical western red cedar. And they're not producing any seedlings, so nothing is regenerating out here except for the blackberry. Blackberry, thistles, nettles are doing really great as well. We've got some reed canary grass. Yeah, so a lot of that stuff is doing really well. We first planted this whole entire field actually back in 2012. So that was when I actually planted this field. And it was since forgotten about, and all of this blackberry came in. So 3 years ago, during our first grant that we acquired with American Forests, which American Forest is based out of DC, and Alcoa provides money to their relief foundation. And this particular Alcoa group is one of the like prime spots that they're looking at reforesting. And so we more or less go through Alcoa and they say, yeah, that sounds like a really great project. And hey, it's really close by. So that's kind of one of the other big components. Instead of going all the way out to the South Fork, the North Fork, you know, it's really kind of in their home base area more so. And so that's why this was a huge interest project. So we receive funds for 1 year to plant 1 acre. And you don't get any funds past that. And we have since been able to get 3 consecutive grants to do that. So we've just been kind of building on top of that. Yeah, during the Alcoa staff work party, so with the grants, we do 3 work parties per year. So 1 in the fall, a private work party with just their staff that come out, and then another one in the spring. And they cover the cost to host those work parties. So we actually, for those grants, we get $10,000 per 1 acre, which they want 700 trees planted. So it's a pretty sweet deal, covers a lot of time, which is great. And the actual cost of coordinating all the different work parties. So we usually just use those in lieu of our, you know, community engagement opportunities that we have out here. The 3rd grant, we're going directly through Alcoa this time. I'm not really sure how that worked, but American Forest isn't doing something specifically. So we asked them for $15,000 because, hey, our next area is further that way, and so we're gonna have to spend even more time carting stuff out, and it is in a little bit more of a blackberry heavy area. So we asked for additional funds there. And we got it. So that'll be this fall and winter and spring out here. So the first year, this blackberry, it was covered. You could not even get through this field. It was climbing up all of these trees. It was in all of those lower branches. It was actually over the bat boxes as well, so no bats were able to use them. I mean, you couldn't see anything. So I had mentioned that Janet Murray is a volunteer land steward out here. She's been out here for the last 10 years. Before cutting back the trail, she would spend all of her time only trying to keep that trail back. And she comes out like once a week. When she's busy, it's every other week. So it gives you kind of an idea how much she comes out here. And then Dave, who is another land steward that lives down the street, he only likes to do trail stuff. So that's kind of his thing. And Janet does some of the restoration stuff. So they usually kind of partner different activities they like to do because I need it all out here. Yeah, so then we were able to open it, so she was able to do more, and I'll kind of show another project that she was able to work on. So she leveraged funds with the Native Plant Society, got a small grant to do some additional planting out here. So she's been manually removing reed canary grass and then planting in native rushes, sedges, that sort of a thing to create an open vernal pool. So basically just an open water, small little kind of wetland area, because that's more or less what kind of used to be out here. We planted a bunch of willows in there too on parts that we didn't really want to keep open. We harvested from that willow right there. So in the winter months, you can just go in, take a cutting, and then stick it into the ground. And so when you actually have a source right here, it's why buy them? You know, you can use them for free, so it's great. So we've come in, cut the blackberry, and we cut it back every year with brush cutters because there's no other way to get these tall enough. You'll notice even on some of our other properties, we had a really good Field Friday photo out at Ladies of the Lake. It is a 15-foot tall tree, and the blackberry completely grew over it, and for a couple of years, so it was getting really sad, but then we were able to open it all the way back up. So, I mean, they're vines, they will crawl up as far as they can go, so they're really just looking for the branches for trellising. We left one patch for you over here, and we'll kind of walk back by, that we did not cut. And you can picture every 12 feet, there is a blue tube with a tree in there. This was cut in December. So this is just, you know, one season of growth. So this is what 1 year, well, a little bit less than 1 year, but 1 year's growth looks like. And then you start getting into what I call the old growth blackberry, where you get the really thick canes that will just kind of resprout. So if you keep cutting it back, then those roots will get smaller and smaller instead of bigger and bigger. We actually had a Boy Scout group come out, and they were all about digging. So I said, perfect, I will set you on to the blackberry. They were able to get, you know, pretty, like, probably actually about the size that we're all kind of standing out here of roots out of the ground. So there is a little bit less blackberry, but there's still quite a bit coming back in. And so that's just one project that we'll kind of walk by too. So the planting, so we've done a little bit more than 3 acres of planting. You get one project going and then everybody's interested. You asked, if NC was involved. We actually had Kelly Insurance donate a bunch of trees because they heard about this project. So we were able to plant an additional, I think, almost 200 trees out here. Fun fact, it was the wettest day I have ever seen out here, and Janet as well, when they planted. I think everybody lasted 2 hours, and that was about it. It was downpouring in a November day. We have partnered with NC out here to do some of these planting projects. We partnered with Whatcom Conservation District. BB Warm was out here. We had Orca Recovery Day out here. So that was kind of a last minute, the Orca recovery was a big thing a few years ago. We already had this work party planned, and the Conservation District was saying, hey, we can provide even some more plants if we have a project on this particular day. We already had this scheduled, and we said, well, it's not exactly, Chinook salmon friendly, but it's related because it's Butler Creek, which, you take into account all of the landowner use that feeds into it, feeds into Lake Terrell, goes to Terrell Creek, and it makes its way to the Salish Sea. So it's all important, but that's kind of how we termed that. It's all connected. So we had all of those out there. We have had a Lummi school group come out here. We were going to do another planting out here with them in the spring. Pre-COVID, that whole situation happened. So we had the high school group. The thing about this area I mentioned with the vicinity part, right, it's maybe a 15-20 minute drive from Lummi area. So this is the only property that we have without it being, say, Point Whitehorn, that we can actually get any of those kids out to. Unless they're driving a solid hour one way and then another hour on the way back to get anywhere in the North Fork or the South Fork. So, right, yeah, so this is one of those very few, of course, the squirrel, opportunities that we have in this whole kind of Birch Bay watershed area to provide kind of that space for it, which is pretty cool. So we get a lot of people interested. For land stewards, I go through a 2-hour training with them, and then I take them out to the site so they can get an idea instead of just handing them a map and saying good luck. Had a lot, but kind of like out here, right? Okay, here you go, this is going to be your site, and then you come out here, okay, what do I do? That's the number one question as a volunteer. What do I focus on? Because there's a lot to do, where should I prioritize my time? A site like this, it's keeping the plants alive that we already have out here. That's kind of number one, before we can do anything else and tackle anything more. And so that's where the 1 acre is perfect, because with all of those grants, we're able to do some maintenance at the same time that we're cutting in some new spots as well. So we've been pretty strategic with that part. But yeah, so with volunteers, we are very strict that they're not enforcers. That's my job. But they're informed observers, and they can provide outreach opportunities if they feel comfortable. So if they meet a landowner, then they all have, I usually give them a stack of my cards, so then they can pass along the information. I usually tell them, please do so, because that's oftentimes the only way I can make contact. So I'm working on meeting all of our neighbors, but if you have a minimum of 4 neighbors per property, multiply that by 90, I'm still getting there. And then if they change ownership, that sort of a thing. So this property, kind of want to talk about basic monitoring. So what our kind of responsibilities are. So I did provide you an updated budget, which I'm pretty excited. So the budgets we have never had before until this last year. So even with the Stewardship Committee, we have been trying to hone those down, think of everything, that we may have missed. Additional info in there. So on the first part, it's, this is where it was first basic monitoring budget. So it's, hey, I'm just going to come out here once a year, check on the property, assume we don't have to do anything else, and that's kind of the budget. Additional that we're working on adding is, hey, required Class A and Class B noxious weeds. So legally for state law, if you have Class A or Class B noxious weeds, you're supposed to be removing them off of your property. But first, we need an inventory anyway, so that's where volunteers are really great. You hand them a list and you say, hey, tell me how many of these plants that you see. Those are really great activities. But the term that I heard that I really liked, I call the really large trees that are still there, like at Wildcat, those really large spruce trees, I call them legacy trees. Because Jake Steiner said, hey, I'm just not going to cut those ones. Like I'm going to leave them. I'm going to go sit there and read a book, and I'll harvest these other ones, right? So it's that legacy component of the one individual landowner decided, hey, I'm not going to cut those trees down. Legacy impacts is what I would term more so this particular property. So the impact that we have put on this property because of the history and after what it was, we now have a lot that we have to do to get it back to that point so then it can just take care of itself. And that's still assuming that we don't have to worry about neighbors.